a YouTube channel, Viking Preparedness. I have a Patreon channel, Viking Preparedness. I have another channel, Shofar Mountain, which is where we put sermons. I wrote a book, Preparedness, Survivalist Family, Strong Americans, Prepared Americans for a Strong America. I'm not selling it today, I did it. My wife and I have been into preparedness since we knew each other. I've been in preparedness since before that. I grew up overseas. My parents worked for the federal government, so we moved every 2 years. I actually was evacuated. We bugged out, if you will, from Cyprus, the island of Cyprus in the middle of the Mediterranean. The Greeks and the Turks had a civil war, and we were evacuated to what was then the Paris of the Middle East, Beirut, Lebanon. Evidently, it was really nice. I was 2. I don't remember it. I do remember being evacuated from southern Laos when they had a 500-year flood of the Mekong River, and we started our journey in a big army truck, probably a deuce and a half, but I don't specifically remember that. And we went to a boat. We got on a boat with machine guns on the front and the back of it, and we went through the jungle and then up a river, and then we went to an improvised airstrip, and we got on an airplane and we flew somewhere else until the floodwaters receded from where we were supposed to live in Laos at the time. And so my family has been into preparedness and understood the need to be ready for things that you don't expect since I was a kid. Went into the military after school. I was an infantryman at first in the 25th Infantry in Hawaii. Then I went to Special Forces, and I spent the rest of my career in Special Forces and in National Intelligence assignments. Retired back in the early 2000s. Worked for the federal government again for about 8 years, and then my wife and I decided we were going to come to this area. We had bought property in the 90s, and we established Shofar Mountain. And Brother Roger is here with his wife, Sister Donna. They're part of the Shofar contingent. And so that's it. We live off-grid. My wife and I have been off-grid since 2012. We started out in a little trailer camper that I paid $300 for. So I'll tell you how nice it wasn't. Now we're in a house that will one day be finished. So that's me. I am a pastor. I was a pastor of a Bible church for about 6 years in Kansas, and then we now follow Torah. I mean, Jesus Christ is still our Lord and Savior, but we try to keep Torah to the best that we can. I'm happy to talk with anyone about that wants to, but that's not what I'm talking about today. But how many people here read the Bible? Excellent. So Proverbs 6:6. It's one of my favorite verses. It says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise." And then it goes on to say, she gathers her food in the summertime so that she's ready when winter comes. Winter's coming, right? It's a phrase in a popular TV show right now, but winter's coming. It's a biblical principle to be prepared now while times are fat and easy. And right now we are in fat, easy times. Anybody right now can go to Walmart or Sam's or your grocery store and buy as much food as you want for not a whole lot of money, and you're not depriving anybody else by doing it. It's not like you're going to buy the last bag of rice and no one else is going to have any rice because you're a greedy son of a gun. So now are the fat times. There's an example given in the word of Joseph, and he becomes in charge of all the granaries and everything in Egypt, and he interprets Pharaoh's dream, and he says basically, hey, we're going to have 7 fat years and 7 lean years, and I'm paraphrasing here. But then what Joseph does is he stores up food for the 7 fat years, and then when the 7 lean years, the famine comes, everybody prospers because of that. And so preparedness is a biblical concept. And for those of you who read the Bible, there's many, many more. But again, I'm not going there because Gordy asked me to talk about food preparation and stuff like that. And so I titled it, Preparedness, Food Systems, and Plans. Dun, dun, dun. All right, why have a food plan? You know, hey, this is a prepper group, right? So it's like, I was going to start this out, well, here's why you should have a food plan. If you guys haven't figured that out, that you need a food plan, we're all in trouble. But here is my experience. I've been involved with preppers. We called ourselves survivalists back in the 90s, since the late 80s. Everywhere we moved, we either joined or formed a prepper group. But that's what they're called today. We call them teams. The word mag wasn't invented back then. And so I've been around a lot of people who call themselves now preppers or back then survivalists or whatever. And it's mildly appalling to me, the number of us that have lots of guns, lots of ammo, lots of really cool gear, and when you get down to it and look at how much food they don't have a lot of food. And we're going to get to what's a lot of food and what's not a lot of food. But a person who has a lot of guns and ammo and not enough food is going to be a problem. They're going to be part of the problem, because when his little girl looks up at him and says, "Daddy, I'm hungry," and she's losing weight before his eyes, and the only thing he has to solve that problem is an AK or an AR or whatever, a shotgun, he's going to go try and solve that problem. And then more problems are going to be created one way or another. And so food is important. We live in a troubled world. I have a saying I use that at any given time we're 72 hours away from chaos. From absolute chaos that the average person cannot conceive of, because you haven't been in a place where normal people go nuts. I've been in places where normal people go nuts, and it's an ugly thing. I'm not saying 72 hours from now the world's going to fall apart, but something can happen right now while we're sitting here that 72 hours from now we're all going to live in a different world. And so that's not a lot of time once the go code is given. I did a video a while ago, and I think I titled it something like "The Two Greatest Threats in Tiawaki." The reason I wrote Tiawaki, the end of the world as we know it, is because that's like a little trigger on YouTube and everybody watches that video. But there's two greatest threats, because I have a lot of people ask me, what do you think the biggest threat is that we face today? Is it war with North Korea? Is it mixing it up with the Russians in Syria? Is it an EMP? Is it a blah, 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 blah? Is it all these things? No. Those are the causes of the two biggest threats, and the number one biggest threat in any kind of horrible, life-changing scenario is starvation. That's the biggest threat, starvation, because we live in a just-in-time society. We live in a society where I can order something on Amazon Prime. I live in the middle of nowhere, and it can come to my brother Roger's place in 2 days, and I can have it. Pow! Another brother of ours used to order his dog food at Amazon Prime. 40-pound bags of dog food showing up at his house, no shipping and handling. Why carry that from the store? The grocery stores have 72 hours worth of food in them. They kind of replenish stock pretty much every 72 hours. And then around here we don't get a lot of big snowstorms, but I've lived in places where there were, and when the storm comes in, it's like the shelves get wiped bare by the time guys get home from work. And that's just on a regular snowstorm. So if something bad happens, the food that's in the stores will be gone, people will buy it, and no more food's coming, because it's a fragile trucking industry. And so I think that an adequate food plan is really the foundation of basic preparedness. And when I talk to people about, being preppers or whatever, I always get to how much food do y'all have stored up? I mean, Roger will tell you, I talk to everybody about that. I'm like, well, how much food? I kind of judge people. You don't judge me. We all judge people. I judge people by how much food they have put in. Because you've got this really cool, maybe you don't. I don't really know you all that well yet. But, maybe you've got a cool AR with all the Gugas and 10,000 rounds of ammo. You may never have to shoot that gun at all in anger. But you're going to have to eat. I mean, that's a given. You're going to have to eat. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How much food do you need to store? Or maybe better put, how long do you need to be able to rely on your food storage plan? Does that make more sense? Because what I eat and what Kate eats and what you eat may be different. FEMA, the Red Cross, the Department of Homeland Security, you can go to their websites, you can follow little rabbit trails, and you can get to the point where they recommend that you store some food in your house because you are in America. They recommend, how much food do they recommend you have?
2 weeks.
3 days.
3 days.
It's a month.
Oh, month.
See, but y'all, those are the answers that everybody gives. But here's what they do. They say you should have 2 weeks worth of food in your house that needs minimal care to prepare it. It's pretty easy to make. 2 weeks worth of food in your house. at any given time. That's left over from the nuclear war days when they thought you'd have to shelter in a shelter for 14 days for the radiation to be good enough for you to come out. They've kept that. That's in there. So you should have 2 weeks worth of food in your house. Then they tell you to have a plan, make a kit, get informed. And that kit is what they call a 72-hour kit, what most of us call bug-out bags. And you're supposed to have about 3 days worth of food in that. They tell you should have 3 days worth of food at your office if you don't work at home, and you should have 3 days worth of food in your car. And so if you start adding that up, 2 weeks, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, here, and here, 72 hours, 72 hours, you're getting close to 3.5 weeks, which I just round that off to a month. Thereabouts. So they're saying have about a month's worth of food. So I ask people this, if you had to shut your doors today and you couldn't come out of your house, how long could your family eat 3 meals a day? And then I ask people to think about that. And I'm not going to ask anybody here that, like on camera especially. But you should ask yourself that. If I shut the doors, how long could we eat 3 healthy meals a day for in my house? Because having a month's worth of food does not make you a prepper. It makes you a good American citizen. Because the government's telling you to have that much food. And so think about that when we go to how much. How much food you should have depends on your, not mine, not his, not somebody else on YouTube, your assessment of what your threat is. What do you think the threat is? Because nobody has a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. I have my own theories of what's going to happen, but I don't know. God did not call me aside and say, Joe, check it out. Tell the people this. If he does, I'll tell you. But he hasn't told me that. He just gave me a brain and I get to see what's going on in the world. So you have to decide what you think is going on, and then you have to do the thought process. What are the effects of that threat? Is it a hurricane? Everybody here remembers Katrina, right? Katrina, George Bush is president, and he gets hammered and hammered and hammered by the press because it took 3 days to get food and water to the people. So, you should have 3 days worth of food in your car. I mean, what are you whining about? And I don't like these MREs, they're not good. Well, then don't eat it. I mean, people are complaining. But it took 3 days to get food and water to Katrina. And reality, here. This is a great bug-out plan. I got a credit card in my wallet. A credit card in Marquis is a great bug-out plan for something like a hurricane. Just get in your car and drive away from the hurricane impact zone and get a hotel. Or go stay with your aunt, or mom and dad, or something like that. So if your major threat that you're preparing for is a hurricane or a snowstorm or whatever, that's all you got to think about is that much food. But I submit to you that we should probably be setting our sights a little bit higher for a slightly bigger problem. For this group, how self-sufficient do you want to be? I'm a prepper. I need to be able to rely on myself for me and mine. Cool. I salute that thought process. How self-sufficient do you really want to be? Because for a lot of us, we like the idea of being self-sufficient, but we don't like what goes into being self-sufficient. Why won't anybody help me? That's not very self-sufficient, right? So you need to ask yourself, how self-sufficient do I want to be? How self-sufficient do we want to be? Me as an individual, us as a family, things like that. The Latter-day Saints, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, used to, is anybody here LDS? Okay, you can correct me. They used to say have a year's supply of food and other things. I think they've backed off on that a little bit because it was too hard to do. No, they haven't? They still do. I think that's a great plan. A year's supply, at least. Kate and I have been involved in the past with what I will call Christian survivalists, who are like hardcore Christians and hardcore survivalists. Maybe some of you are. I don't know. They were stocking 3.5 years worth of food for their family. A lot of them were stocking 3.5 years worth of food at their place and then more food at another place. Trying to do that. And this was a couple different groups of people that we were hanging out with. And so, again, how self-sufficient do you want to be? It comes up to you. What's your name again, brother?
Adam.
Adam.
Yes.
you were talking about pace today, right? So the very first video I ever shot, I have over 1,000 videos, was on pace. And it's a horrible video. I mean, the information is good, but my delivery is horrible. Because it's the first video I ever shot, and I was very nervous in front of the camera. But whatever food storage you come up with, whatever you decide is adequate, whatever your plan is, I encourage you to go back to what Adam said about PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. I have a closet full, I'm just saying, I have a closet full of Mountain House, cases of Mountain House food for me and my family. It's enough to last this long. Awesome! What if your house burns down? What if you get caught away from home and nukes are going off and you're not coming home ever? What's your plan? You have to have an alternate plan, a contingency plan, and an emergency plan. We're going to kind of look at a little bit of that stuff today, too. True story. Spice this with some stories. I had a job one time where I was not under my own name, and so when I'm on the internet, I'm not under my own name. And I had a screen name like everybody does on the internet, but then I had a name that, you're my good friend, and we've been at 55 of these things, and I've slept at your house 5 times, and when we did camp outs together, and I had a different name. And so, I meet this guy, I've talked to him on the internet, and I'm going someplace that's going to be close to where I think he lives, and I find out I've got 4 days off. So hey man, you want to get together? And he's like, yeah. And you can come to my place. So I came to his place, and he showed me he was a hardcore prepper. He had the bug out retreat that he was living on and all the things, which we don't need to go into. Go to church with him in the morning. We do church. We come back, and I'm getting ready to leave, and he's taking his measure of me, and he goes, come here, Dan, I want to show you something because I trust you. It made me feel bad because my name's not Dan, right? But that's what I told him my name was because I had to. And I'm like, all right. And he had a barn a little bit wider than this wall, and about as tall as that, with the double doors on it, and it had 3 big, massive locks on it with big hasps on it. And he literally, we're in the middle of his property, and he does this. And he opens it up, and he goes, he had 2 little kids. He and his wife had 2 little kids on this property. That barn was full, front to back, floor to ceiling, with buckets of food. And I said, I'll say Bob, I don't want to say his name. Bob, this is more food than you and your family could eat if you started eating it now. And he goes, oh Dan, this is not for me. This is for the saints. I said, the saints? He goes, the saints of the Most High. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, times are coming when Christians are going to flee persecution, and this is for them. And I said, have you told anybody about this? He goes, oh, mercy, no. That's what he said. That's how he talked. Mercy, no. He goes, if I told them, the New World Order would come and get her or something. He had a lot of conspiracy theories. I said, well, how are they going to find it? He goes, the Holy Spirit will let them know. Do you know, since that time, I have met 2 other people who are doing the same thing? They're storing food for people they don't know. Contingency planning. Whether those people had food where they were and they're fleeing or not, they're storing food for those people. So how much food should you store? That's an answer you're going to have to do. It depends on your ideas, your concepts, and your plans. So we're going to talk about a couple different plans. Short-term food storage, I think it's a year. I think 1 year's food is the bare minimum amount of food that you should have stored up, or a plan for. You should have a plan to feed your family without the system for a year. The reason why is this. People say, well, I only need 3 months of food. Well, what if it's something really bad? Well, then I'm just going to plant my garden. What if your garden fails that first year? If your garden fails, how many people here actually grow vegetables and stuff in garden? Cool, so things don't work sometimes, or we could get everything just going good, and by God, 15 deer came into the thing and ate the whole thing last night, and the dog didn't. You stupid dog, why didn't you bark at him? Or whatever. Stuff happens, right? And so if you have a year's worth of food, you can go through a bad planting season and maybe get to the next one, is what I'm thinking here. The good news is, for a year's supply of food, you don't need to do anything special. You can go to the grocery store. You can buy a year's worth of food at the grocery store if you buy all the things that don't need to be refrigerated. You can buy canned goods. You can buy soup. When I used to get nervous at the world situation by reading things and watching things, I'd go get a grocery cart, half a grocery cart, full of Progresso soup. Because my thought was, Progresso soup, we can make some rice or some noodles, I can open up a can of Progresso soup, pour it on there, and we can all eat. Right? We'll just thin it out a little bit. Graham crackers, and Ritz crackers, saltine crackers, peanut butter jelly, pickles. What else?
Tuna helper.
Tuna helper, tuna, salmon. If you eat ham, Spam, canned ham.
Peanut butter.
All those things will last a year. They really, if you keep, I'm going to go into how you got to keep it, but they'll last a year. Make sure I'm staying on track. Yeah. Here's the thing, though. You need to buy what you eat. You need to eat what you buy. Therefore, rotating your food stocks. My wife not only grows vegetables that we eat, she picks weeds. It's a joke we have, but she'll go out there and pick salad for dinner, and that's what we're going to have. But I'm a prepper. She's a prepper, and so we have lots of canned veggies. Well, we don't eat them, hardly ever. And so we mark all our cans whenever we buy anything canned, jars or boxes. Like this is, we're still in October, right? So it's the 10th month, and it's 2017. And so if we bought anything this month, you'll see a 10 and a 17 on it. That means October 17th. That way I know to eat the older stuff that says 6/16 before I eat the stuff that says 10/17 on it. And we always get to the point where we've got canned goods and vegetables that are getting to be a year old. Food typically doesn't go bad. Your can of green beans, as long as the can remains intact and doesn't get rusted, isn't going to go bad, but it will lose quality, it'll get mushier, and it will lose vitamin content and things like that. You can still eat it, but come on. And so when it starts approaching a year, we give food to food pantries. And to me, that's like the cost of making sure that I have green beans when the balloon goes up if I have to. So that's just a concept, but you have to rotate your food stocks, and it wouldn't do us any good, Sister Kate and I, to buy 4 cases of Spam because we're not going to eat it. So why would I buy that? And so you shouldn't fall into that trap either. You can find it online. You can find it on my blog. I have an old blog I used to do before I did YouTube called vikingpreparedness.blogspot.com. And I got this idea from some Mormon friends of mine, and I made these shelves on the wall that come at an angle like that, and then we put cans in them. And that way we load the shelves from the back, and the cans roll down to the front, so we're always eating the cans that we loaded first. And so it's basically first in, first out. Whatever you put in first, you're pulling out first, so you're eating the old stuff first. You have to protect your food from bugs, mice, moths, moisture. You want to keep it cool, dry, dark, and bug-free. It's basically what you want to do. Cans, that's not generally a problem. I made a mistake one time. Our food was in our food storage room / washer and dryer room, and I had this great idea. Let's save heating costs. Let's disconnect the dryer hose from outside, put some pantyhose over it to capture the lint, and we'll pump the warm air into this space. Well, that warm air is full of moisture, and all my cans rusted pretty quick. So you got to worry about rust. We store spaghetti, pasta, because it's easy to buy, right? It's like, you see them on sale, 88 cents for a pound of spaghetti, so you get 10 of them, and you stick them in your cart, and you take them home, and what do you do with them? We stick them in bins, tote bins, and throw bay leaves in there, just regular bay leaf spices, and we've never had a problem with bugs in our pasta. We do the same thing with rice. We just lay I call them rice pillows. I think it's 25-pound bags of rice, lay them in the bin, stack them up, throw some bay leaves in there, put the lid on, and then when you have your food storage area, you want to keep it so that you can see between the rows and behind the rows, so mice aren't back there chewing through a tub and into your rice and they've been eating that for a year or something like that. You want to be able to, so you have to have enough space to store your food. But think about shelves, think about things like that. We helped friends of ours, they had 8 or 10 kids, big preppers, and they were having mice get into their food. And so we built a special room for them and sealed it all off with caulk and everything like that, and made a really tight door on it. And then when we put the food in there, we made it so you could walk all the way around the piles of food and stuff like that, so that he could watch out for mice. And then we put some traps in there and things like that. So you have to protect your food. So that's 1 year. And I call that short-term food storage. Medium-term food storage. So it's more than that. And I'm getting weird looks from you guys. But I call medium-term food storage 10 to 25 years. The food you put up will last 10 to 25 years. That's things like these MREs. I'll tell you a story. When I first joined the Army, I'm a second lieutenant in the Army. I'm not making any money. And we were in Hawaii, and you could buy cases of MREs at the commissary in Hawaii. Why would you want to? Nobody likes it. And the old MREs weren't that great. They were better than sea rations, but they weren't as good as they are now. And so we had no children, we bought 2 cases of MREs, and that was our emergency food, and if, something happens, we'll have some food. Then I joined Special Forces years later. And in SF, when we would go somewhere, they would dock our pay. It's an Army thing, but they pay you, but part of your pay is for food, right? So when you go on a field deployment, they take away the food money that they put in your paycheck that you've actually gotten really used to getting, and they give you MREs instead. And so you're going to be gone for a month, you're going to get 3 times 30, you're going to get 90 MREs. Here's your MREs. We hardly ever ate our MREs when we were on deployment. If we went to Korea, we're eating ramen and moon pies and drinking Coke, or we're eating Korean food or eating kimchi. If we went to Thailand, it's like, I'm not eating MRE when I'm hanging out with Thais, I'm going to eat Thai food. And we would do things like that. So we would have these stacks of MREs that we paid for. You're not allowed to sell them. You paid for it in the Army, but you're not allowed to sell it at a pawn shop or something like that. If you do, you get in a lot of trouble. And so what do you do with them? I'm a prepper, man. I just kept them. Do you know I ended up with a pallet of MREs? It's at Hyper Acres to this day. A pallet of MREs that are good for 7 years if they're stored under really good conditions. Mine have been alternately stored in a garage that gets to 110 degrees and gets down to like -7 degrees. They've been stored in the back of trucks going across the country. I mean, are they any good? I could, if I was a bad person, open up those cases of MREs and sell them at a gun show because they look brand new. Man, I wouldn't want to eat those things. I bet you a lot of that stuff is pretty nasty in there right now. And so, storing something like MREs for a long-term thing, yeah, it'll store that long, but what happens when that time comes and it's over? So, we had this thought. My men used to laugh at me. They said I was a nut. Every Wednesday night at the Fox household was Civilian Food Appreciation Night. That's what my men called it. We ate MREs for dinner every Wednesday night. And the kids loved it because we'd heat up a pot of water and we'd throw all the entrees in the pot of hot water so they'd get warm. And then we would do the trading. I'll give you peanut butter for your cheese. I'll give you this for that on the table. And the kids got to open all these little packages and it was fun and it saved my wife from having to cook and clean it up and stuff like that. But I was like, man, we got to start rotating through these MREs. We never ate our way to the bottom. And then my kids, decided they didn't like MREs anymore. Imagine that. But MREs are very nutritious. They're nutritionally dense. If you eat 3 MREs a day and you're not carrying a rucksack through those mountains, you're going to gain weight. Right? It's like 4,000 something calories, I think, in the 3 MREs in a day. So they're really good for that. I used to take them for hunting. I'd grab an MRE and throw it in my bag and I'd eat it while I was out there hunting. And so I'm just telling you, MREs have a place in your food storage plan, but you better think about what happens when they run past their expiration date and they're not stored well. And so think about rotating them through. And remember the golden rule: store what you eat what you store. So get familiar with MREs if you're going to eat them. Freeze-dried. Anybody have Mountain House type freeze-dried food? I thought everybody did. That's great food. It tastes good. It's easy to prepare. It just takes hot water to prepare. And we have like blueberry granola, and we have. Am I talking about this? Yeah, I'm going to talk about that later. So it's easy to prepare. It lasts a long time. It's got a lot of variety. The problem is it's expensive. Especially if you can buy a year's supply for one person for $35,000, whatever. I mean, it's not that much, but it's expensive food as food goes. But it tastes good and it does last 25 years. And so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can do that if you have enough money. Or maybe you could just buy a little bit a couple cans of it, of goodies that you can intersperse with your other food storage to kind of spice up things. Who here has seen the survival food bucket? This bucket lasts 72 hours of food. I think they sold them at Walmart for a while, right? Or Sam's or something like that. I bought some. I did, because it's like, man, that's pretty cheap. You know, you kind of do the math on that. It's like, that's like X amount of dollars a meal. That's not too bad. It's a convenient way to put up food. You know, you can buy it. It's got a variety of different things in it. Oatmeal and this, that, and the other thing. Most of it is like, what's the word, dehydrated food? It's not really freeze-dried. It's like, what's oatmeal? Those instant oatmeal packs? Is that dehydrated? Yeah. It's a lot of stuff like that in there. You know, just add hot water, stir it, and you can eat it. It's not bad. I question the nutritional value of it, but I have a friend and a brother who gives me guff, which we're going to get to storing corn and wheat and rice and beans. And he goes, yeah, well, what about if it's not GMO? I said, dude, or what if it's GMO or something like that? I'm like, dude, let me tell you something. If you haven't had anything to eat for 2 weeks, more importantly, your little girl hasn't had anything to eat for 2 weeks, and I open up a box of Twinkies, which is horrible food, right? Twinkies, there's nothing redeeming in Twinkies. You're going to eat those like it's nobody's business. You're going to love them. So don't not store food because you're worried about it not being nutritionally good or whatever. If you have a choice between nutritionally good food and Twinkies, go with nutritionally good. But don't say, well, I'm not storing anything because, you know, I can't get what I want. Well, you're going to be hungry. So, freeze-dried food, survival food buckets. Yeah. You knew about the Mormons. Has anybody here been to a LDS cannery, a Mormon cannery? We've done that. I don't think they let people do that anymore, do they?
They're all down.
They're all closed down?
No, they're off and on. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
We've done that a few times. We took our church there in Kansas a couple times. You call them up, make arrangements, you go. You pre-order what you want. They have everything. And you put it into number 10 cans, which is pretty cool. If you've never done that, you just form a little work crew, and I'm putting this. My favorite thing is the dehydrated apples, the dried apple slices. Man, those things are like potato chips of goodness. And then you just seal the cans, and it's good. Those are a good deal if you can get access to that. And it's relatively inexpensive, and it's pretty good dehydrated food. And again, once you store it all up correctly, it'll last about 25 years. And it's decent food. But the golden rule, store what you eat what you store and rotate. You know, if you're going to have survival food supplies that are longer than a year, you need to actually start working out a food storage plan, because a lot of you are close to my age. How many people thought the world was going to end here? And then, all right, well, no, that didn't happen. Okay, maybe things are going to get really bad here. Oh, that didn't happen. No, you know, my hope is that I bounce my great-grandchildren on my knee. It really is. I think 3 days from now, we could be living in, you know, Mad Max land. But I really hope I can bounce my great-grandchildren on my knee. And if that's the case, what am I going to do with these mountain house meals that last for 25 years, 12 years from now, when they run out? So it's like, you know, it's time to start tucking into those things. Let's start making some lunch. Well, then we'd have to buy more. No, you're going to have to buy more eventually. Do you want to buy that much again in 25 years, or do you want to just, you know, piecemeal it out a little bit? Who here has seen Coast Guard emergency rations? Daytrex rations. They taste like sugar cookies. It's a really good short-term, long-term. I mean, you can eat them for a short term, but they'll last forever meal. They're great in car kits. And you can get them fairly inexpensively. They're called Coast Guard rations or Daytrex bars. And it comes in a package about this big. When I sent my 2 girls to college, I built them bug-out bags, and they're both little. My one daughter weighed about 105, and the other one's probably about 110 pounds, so they can't carry these 90-pound rucksacks, and it's Kansas in the winter. And so for food, we put in a couple of those 3,600-calorie Daytrex bars. Those are good. They can stand extreme heat and extreme cold and not degrade. And so if you're throwing something in your car, I recommend those for long term. They're kind of boring though, and they're mildly expensive. Sister Kate, when we started out in the survivalist movement, I dressed her up like an infantryman. Right? And she would have all the infantry gear, and I packed her rucksack with really important things like a 12-foot long piece of rope and a snap link, and because that's what I knew at the time, right? And so she looked like a little ranger out there carrying all the stuff, and yeah, she was 20-something years old and she could carry it. She was a tough girl. Then she got smart, and she's like, I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this, and now, you know, we're getting a little bit up there in years, and, you know, I am not the 30-year-old Green Beret I once was, and she's not, you know, bench pressing 110 pounds like she used to. And so it's like she did some research about a year ago on what kind of food can she carry in her bug out bag that is nutritionally dense for the least amount of weight. Because at the end of the day, your bug out bag is to get you from here to where you're going. That's it. It's not for a camp out. It's not for us to sit here and tell war stories to each other. It's like, I got to get home because that's where my kids are. And to get home, I have to walk, maybe. And to walk, I need fuel. And so I need to fuel this machine. Let's go. It doesn't need to be fancy. And what did you come up with?
Chia seeds and granola.
Chia seeds and granola. There's a lot of calories in chia seeds and granola, and they sell them at Walmart now, believe that or not. They taste kind of weird, but it's something you might want to look into because it stores forever too. Where do you store all this food? Because when you start getting serious about food storage, it starts taking up space, right? If you go into a modern built home, they have these things called pantries that look like a broom closet. I mean, it's like, you call that a pantry? What are you going to put in there? Well, nobody cooks anymore, and nobody, you know, stores food like Grandma did. So they don't have real pantries. But even in a regular house, if you like convert a room into a food storage room or something, it starts building up, and it starts getting in the way. We did a thing in my son's room at our last house where he had what size bed does he have? Is that a double bed? It's about this wide. A bed about this wide. Pulled the bed out, put that footprint of space with buckets of food, and then buckets are round, and so there's space in the middle of those, and then we put bottles of water in between all the buckets, and then we put a piece of plywood on top of it, box springs and mattress on top of that, so the bed is about this high, which is high. You put a dust ruffle around it, and it looks like one of those rich, sophisticated beds, right? Because it's high. But it stores all that food right there, and it's out of the way. You can store food. We used to store food when we started getting serious about this in '98 in a closet. Well, the problem is once you pack it all in there, it's really hard to rotate it. Because now to get to the old stuff to eat it, you know, I just bought 3 new cans of tomato sauce. I already have 12. I've got to pull them all out and stick these in the back to push them in. It's a real pain in the neck to do that. And so shelving is a good idea. Having adequate shelving if you can make space in your garage or whatever. But you don't want it to get too hot, and you don't want it to freeze a lot of times. So give that some thought. Anybody here have buckets of food, 5-gallon buckets? How high can you stack 5-gallon buckets?
Say 4 is pushing it.
Yeah, see, I don't like going above 2. I don't like having 3 buckets on top of each other because all that weight goes on the little rim on the bottom, and it can, over time, it can pop the top of the lids underneath it, especially if you have 2 buckets on top of one, and depending on what you have in there, some stuff is heavier than others. And so you can still stack your buckets and then lay a board across them and then stack more buckets, and you can go to the sky like that if you want to. So just put a shelf or a piece of plywood or OSB or something between your layers of buckets, and you can go really high. I did an experiment one time before Shofar Mountain was Shofar Mountain, but we owned the land, and it was always going to be like our bug out plan. And I thought, I want to store a whole bunch of wheat on Shofar Mountain, but there's nothing there. And you know, no one has been on that property forever, and so I know this time of year, there's dudes dressed similar to what many of us are dressed right now, walking all back and forth across that land, and I don't want them to come and find, you know, buckets of something and get into them. And so I did an experiment, and I took a bucket of wheat, and I wrapped it in hardware cloth so that mice wouldn't chew through the bucket, and then I spray painted it camouflage, and I just hid it in some rocks. 5 years later, a friend of mine said, dude, let's open that thing. It's either good or it's not. If it's, you know, let's find out. And so we opened it, and it was good as the day I put it there. We're going to get into buckets here directly. But you could store stuff outside, some things, if you wanted to. But you got to make space. All right. Short-term plan, medium-term plan, long-term plan. Who here has heard the story about finding wheat in Pharaoh's tomb that sprouted? That part's not true. I've told that story, but I actually did research for this class today, and they did not sprout the wheat. They found wheat in one of the tombs in Egypt. It was in like these big clay jar things. It looked brand new. They tried to sprout it. It did not sprout, but it was still good wheat to eat. So there's the nice side, but I've told the story they could sprout it. They couldn't sprout it. A seed doesn't remain viable for 1,000 years, but you can still eat it. Wheat lasts as long as you keep it stored correctly. I am a huge proponent on people storing 4 things: wheat, rice, beans, and corn. Wheat, rice, beans, and corn. Because it is so cheap. You can put a year's supply of food up with wheat, rice, beans, and corn for less than $400, and that includes the buckets. $400, yeah, give me $400, I'll go buy a Glock. Over time, $400 is nothing. How many Happy Meals does it take to get to $400? You know, at McDonald's. How many beers does it take to get to $400 for people who drink, you know, stuff like that? You can look at how many lattes do you buy during the week to get to $400. You can have a year's supply of food really cheap that'll last indefinitely. You don't have to worry about rotating it. You can actually give it to your great-grandchildren. And so you can get wheat, and people bug me about this all the time too. Is it GMO? Is it this? I don't know. I don't care, because when my wife makes you cornbread and you haven't had anything to eat for 2 weeks, you're going to love it and you're going to eat it and you're not going to worry about GMOs. If you want to buy non-GMO, whatever, knock yourself out. Go ahead and do it. But don't use that as an excuse not to store food. We buy our corn and our wheat at feed stores. Does anybody here not know what a feed store is? You don't have to be embarrassed if you don't. All right, good. Feed stores. Find your feed store, go there. I always talk to the guy, and I'm like, so you got any pesticides or anything like that sprayed on here? Sometimes they'll say, yeah, you can see this corn, it has this pink stuff on it. That's to keep whatever. Like, okay, I don't want that because I'm going to feed it to my prize goat. I don't want my prize goat to eat any of that. They get it, right? They know what you're doing. And so I get the wheat that just came out of the field. It's like, this just came out of the field today. No, it's been dry and dun. It still has little bits of chaff in it. Sometimes it has little rocks in it. And I just buy it by the 50-pound bag, which the last time I bought it was a while ago. It's like $6 for a 50-pound bag, maybe $6 for 100 pounds, I don't know. Somewhere in there. Really cheap, though. And I just take it home and put it in buckets. I'm going to talk about the process of that in a minute. I don't clean it there. I clean it when we use it. So like when we're making cornbread, I'll go dip the corn out, I put it on this flat tray, and we go like this in this wind, and all the chaff blows away, and then we grind it up and make cornbread. Same thing with wheat. I can't find rice and beans any cheaper than at Sam's, if somebody knows a cheaper place, but it's still pretty cheap if you buy rice and beans at Sam's. And here's the deal. If you eat 2 of those things together, corn and beans, rice and beans, wheat's a separate thing. Corn, rice, and beans. If you eat corn, rice, and beans together, any 2 of those together in the same meal, it forms a complete protein in your stomach. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but it has something to do with amino acids that your body needs. If you eat a plate, like we just had beans and rice. There's a reason Mexicans eat beans and rice, or they eat tortillas, called a burrito with beans in the middle, and they roll it up because that's corn, right? Corn tortillas with beans in. They don't know that the average Mexican doesn't know that this forms a complete amino acid in my stomach and it doesn't provide the proper nutrition. They just know that when they eat like this, they feel better. And actually now they know that this is just how we eat because this is what our grandparents figured out, our great-grandparents. And so you eat it together in the same meal. And beans and rice, tortillas made with corn, corn flour or cornbread and beans, those kinds of things. And wheat is the staff of life, right? Bread is the staff of life, wheat is the staff of life. I know a lot of people who say, well, I don't want to buy my wheat until I get my grinder. And the grinder I want to get costs $400, and so I'm not going to buy my wheat. You know, if you have the wheat and you don't have your grinder, when the balloon goes up, you can get on your sidewalk with a brick and grind your wheat in the flour. And you will feed your family and you'll have hot, fresh bread. You have to know how to cook. Actually, you don't have to know how to cook. You can take wheat kernels, throw them in a pot, throw some water on it, and boil it until they're soft, and it's called gruel. It's nutritionally fine. All right, so you don't have to know how to cook. It would be helpful if you did. And with wheat, corn, beans, and rice, you can make a lot of neat things, especially if you buy spices to go with it. And spices store a long time too. How many people here store stuff in 5-gallon buckets? Who here uses Mylar oxygen absorbers? Okay, so does anybody not know how to do that? I can give you a 2-minute class on that. Okay, so what you do is you go to Amazon.com and you order 5-gallon, sometimes they say 6-gallon, that's fine, Mylar bags for as many buckets as you're going to fill, and you get the package deal where they sell you the accompanying oxygen absorbers, right? Because they make different size oxygen absorbers for different size amounts of food. Then here's what you do. You take this Mylar bag, you go whoop, you open it up, you stick it in your buckets. 100 pounds of product, whether that's rice, beans, wheat, or corn, 100 pounds of stuff goes into about 3 buckets. So for math purposes, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you buy those buckets. You don't have to worry about your buckets being BPA free or any nonsense like that. You can get buckets for free if you want to scrounge them by going around to all the different delis and Jimmy John's and saying, hey, can I have your spare buckets? Save me the lids too, and they'll give them to you for free. We've got lots of buckets that way. So you stick the Mylar bag in the bucket, you pour the product into the bag, and then you seal the bag up with an iron, a household iron. You just put the 2 edges together like a pillowcase, and you put a board across your bucket, fold it over on top of the board, and go with an iron. Leave a hole this big. Do all your buckets like that. Now it's time to seal them up. Open up your oxygen absorbers, throw one in the bag, zip it closed. Throw another one in the bag with your iron, zip that part closed. And it sucks the bag down, it removes all the oxygen, and here's what it's doing. All the oxygen comes out of the food product, and any bugs that are in there will die, because they need oxygen also. Get with me later if you want more information on that. I've actually got a bunch of videos on my website, Viking Preparedness at YouTube, on it. How many people here have done dry ice and trash bags? You can do dry ice and trash bags, and it costs about $1 a bucket to do the Mylar bag and oxygen absorber. You know, that's about what it costs for that. I've done dry ice. The wheat I told you that I stored outside for 5 years. Put a trash bag in the bucket, put your product in about this much, throw a fist-sized chunk of dry ice on top of it, fill it the rest of the way with product, rice, beans, wheat, or corn, whatever. Gooseneck it loosely, the bag, and what happens is the dry ice is just frozen CO2, and as it melts, CO2 is heavier than air, carbon dioxide, it displaces the oxygen. And so your thing kind of blows up a little bit. Keep burping the air out of it until it doesn't do that anymore. Tie it off, seal it up. There's no oxygen in your product. There'll be no bugs. That's a different way to do it. There's no reason to do it that way with Mylar and oxygen absorbers because they're only $1 extra a bucket. I did the math one time on how much wheat actually fits into a bucket, how much corn, how much beans, how much rice, and then I did the calorie count on it. Very loose rule of thumb, 1 bucket equals 1 month for 1 person of food. It's a bit light. It's about 1,500 to 1,700 calories depending on which one of those it is. I think corn was the highest calories. So you're going to have to supplement that a little bit. But to me, it's just an easy thing because I'm not great at math. 12 buckets is a light year of food for a person, and so 18 buckets is good. Right? That's kind of how I look at it. If you start thinking about, I have this many kids or this many people in my family, this is how many buckets I need, and those buckets add up. I mean, 12 buckets is 1 year's supply. If you want to do 8-year supply, that's going to be a lot of buckets. So, something to think about. You can also take your rice, wheat, corn, or beans. You can stick it in a bag, like a plastic bag, put it in the bucket, seal it off, seal the bucket lid. There's still oxygen in there, right? So any little microscopic bugs that are in there, if you let them, they will hatch and they will eat your product while they're in the bucket, unless you can freeze it for 72 hours. In Kansas, that was easy to do because it gets cold there and stays cold for a long time. We would just put buckets outside and just let them freeze solid for like 2 weeks. Here, I don't know if you'll be able to do that unless you have access to a freezer, but you could have a friend who runs a meat locker or something, and you can just take your buckets, and you have to stick them in there longer than 3 days because the bucket has to be frozen for 3 days. And so it's going to take a while to freeze all the way through that product. But if you can leave them in there for a week, no bugs will grow as long as you don't let anything else get in there. So that's another way that you can preserve your food. Sugar, salt, honey, stores forever. Your salt may turn into one big block that you have to hit with your hammer. A big deal. Do you know they used to pay people in salt? They used to pay Roman soldiers. There's a phrase, that guy's worth his salt. It's an old phrase meaning that guy's a good guy who works hard. Because they used to pay Roman soldiers in salt. They paid them in salt because it was incredibly valuable and because it was really hard to get. Your body needs salt. Most of us eat way too much salt in our American diet. But when you go down to, okay, I'm only eating the food I stored, the deer I shoot for about the next 2 weeks, and the vegetables I grow, where are you getting your salt? You may only need a quarter teaspoon a day, but you need a quarter teaspoon a day. I made that number up, by the way, but there is an amount of salt that you need a day. Where are you going to get it? Right now, salt is so cheap. You can go buy the cheap off-brand salt at Walmart in the 1 pound little round container for much less than $1. You're sitting on a barter mother load if you buy that stuff and you can have a place to store it. And again, it doesn't matter if it gets rock solid, it's still salt. So salt's something to think about. All right. Has anybody here heard the idea or thought of the idea of buying these steel 55-gallon drums with the sealing lids and putting your food in there? See, when you start getting into big amounts of food that you want to store, you start thinking about bigger containers to put it in. That's an okay idea, but here's what you really want to do. You want to keep your food storage containers man-portable, meaning you need to be able to move it. And 2 buckets is about 66 pounds when it's full of beans and rice. You know, a 55-gallon drum full of beans and rice, you're not going to move it, right? You're not going to move it easy unless you have a machine. So that's something to think about. Keep your loads man-portable, woman-portable, person-portable. Another thing to think about is not putting all your eggs in one basket. If you start storing, a year's supply of food, if you start storing 3 years' supply of food, or whatever you're going to do, some of you are storing for your grandkids who may never show up, whatever. Don't keep it all in one place. If you keep it all in one place, something terrible could happen to that one place. But let's say this is your house, and that's your outbuilding, and I got a garage over there. Just disperse it like that, if that's all you can do. At least if there's a fire, you won't lose all your food, something like that. Same thing with guns, by the way, but that's another story. All right. Wheat, rice, corn, and beans have sustained humanity forever. Forever. You can eat that stuff and live, and I highly recommend you get some of that. All right. Depending on how much food you store, and assuming nothing bad happens to it, and you don't have to move, a volcano doesn't go up or something, you still only have a certain amount of food. Depending on what happens, at the end of your food plan, whether that's 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, Walmart may still not be open. You've got to have a plan for that. PACE planning, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. What's your plan when your food stores run out? How many people here hunt deer? More of you should hunt deer. During the Great Depression, white-tailed deer were almost wiped out in America. White-tailed deer are amazingly easy to kill if you cheat. And everybody cheated. And they killed, it's true. I could kill a deer at Will's within 2 hours of getting home. It's easy if you cheat. People cheated because they're hungry and they're going to feed their family. White-tailed deer were almost wiped out in this country. I remember the 70s in Virginia, there was a lottery to get a ticket to draw a deer, to shoot a deer. Turkeys were almost wiped out. Turkeys are really easy to kill too. Turkey's the hardest thing to successfully hunt in North America if you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, turkeys aren't that hard to kill either. You go around at night with a .22 and a flashlight, you can shoot them out of trees. I mean, it's not hard. And so people killed all the turkeys. The wild game out there is going to disappear in the event of especially in a place like this, where there weren't as many hands going up as I thought were going to go up on deer hunting, but there's a lot of people who hunt deer up here, and they know how to hunt deer. The deer are going to be gone. And so we're not going to be able to depend on wildlife for very long to eat.
What kind of time frame do you think it would take?
I'm sorry?
What kind of time frame do you think it would take for a deer to disappear?
A year. could also say that depends. It's a pandemic flu and 90% of the people died, we could have deer forever, if we are lucky to live. But Great Depression, lots of poor people, deer almost wiped out in America.
Chronic wasting disease may get them before something else.
Sure, or somebody could do a biological warfare on purpose to them. Here's the deal, if you're going to be serious about long-term preparedness and self-sufficiency, you have to get into sustainable agriculture. Meaning you have to be producing critters. That sounded weird. Your critters need to be producing more critters. Your food needs to be producing more food. I'm not talking about going to the sale barn and buying, this steer or that steer or whatever, or ordering on Amazon, delivered in a refrigerator, bull semen to inseminate all your cows. You have to have a sustainable plan. The cattle around here the chickens are gone within, depending on what time the event happens of the year, the chickens could be dead in 24 hours. We've got we probably have millions of chickens growing in this greater area. And if those fans don't work and that cooling doesn't work in the summer, they're done. If the feeders don't work, they're done. And it's just going to be a stinking, disease-ridden mess in those chicken houses. Same thing with cattle. Quite frankly, you look out in the field and they've got, all these cows out there, and it's like, man, that's a lot of meat on the hoof out there. Yeah, until winter comes, what are you going to feed that cattle? I'm going to feed them hay. What are you feeding them next winter? Where are you getting the hay? Because your tractor doesn't work or there's no more gasoline coming. So you have to start thinking about those things. And there are ways to do it because people have raised cattle in this country forever. But the way we do things have to change. And so I asked how many people here raise gardens. I saw that. How many people here raise food critters? Goats, cows, sheep, rabbits. It's a thing. It's not something that you can do overnight. Man, I can't tell you the number of people that I went to a preparedness expo. I was in a company for a while in the Dallas, Texas area. And these guys were selling, several different booths were selling the survival seed pack in a number 10 can, cryogenically quenched for 99 years. This is all you need to grow an acre of food to feed you and your family. Those things were $99 a can, and they sold all of them to people who I knew had never had dirt under their fingernails. And it's like, you guys are kidding yourself if you think that's your food plan. Not you, them. And they've never grown a garden before. It takes time and it takes effort, and so I suggest you start dabbling in that now if you're not. Start raising some kind of critter for food, or start hanging out with people whose kids are in 4-H or something like that, and start learning about raising food animals. Survival gardens, vegetable gardens can give you a lot of vitamins, and they can give you a lot of taste in your wheat, beans, rice, and corn, or whatever. But if you haven't gardened before, you don't know how to garden. And if you haven't gardened in the area you're in now, you don't know how to garden. Because it's different in Washington State than it is here. It's different in Texas than it is here. And so you need to get out there and figure out how your soil works, how you can grow, what your pest problem is, and those kind of things. And I think any serious prepper should have a garden. You have a backyard. If you live in an apartment, you have a balcony or a front stoop or something that you can do container gardening in. There's no excuse not to grow your own food except laziness and not taking your preparedness seriously. I mean, that's a little bit of a slam, but I'm going into Pastor Joe mode here. So it's like, if you're serious about preparedness, you need to be serious about food. Instead of going out and buying more ammo for your new gun, I just got a new gun. It's like, I got to go buy 45 ammo again. It's like, well, instead of doing that, what's your fall garden looking like? Mine? Not so good. I've been neglecting it a little bit. I'm feeling kind of bad about that. But at least I'm honest about it. Okay. Another thing. How many people here have fruit trees? Good. Fruit trees provide an enormous amount of calories in a little space. An apple tree produces a lot of food, if you think about it. And once they get going, they're really not that hard to take care of. And so if you have the space, if you can, I recommend that you grow apple trees, pear trees, whatever kind of fruit trees grow in your area. Who has chickens? I'm not talking about chickens, you already understand. Very good. Who has goats? We just got given to us 4 goats yesterday, right? because the people decided when they moved from Texas to here, they moved to the Ozarks, they have sheep and goats, and they decided they just want to do sheep. That's cool. They gave us goats. Goats are pretty easy. They said goats are too hard to take care of. I think goats are pretty easy to take care of if you understand goats. I think sheep die easy. That's from a guy who doesn't raise sheep. People who raise sheep are probably like, Pastor Joe, you're nuts, man. Sheep are easy, goats are hard. Whatever, get good at something that provides you meat. And if you have kids, I like goats for milk, because you can milk the goats, and my wife milks goats, and something to think about. Who here raises bees? I've tried twice. I failed miserably twice. It's really hard, but I'm trying now to grow sorghum. And I've got sugarcane planted that a brother gave me recently, and we actually split it up and gave it to 4 different families at Shofar Mountain. Hopefully someone will keep it alive over the winter so we can grow. Sugar's a thing. You don't need it to live, but it makes life better. It stores forever, but have a plan for sugar. And bees for me are hard. But I think if you are serious, and I know you guys are getting bored, so we're going to finish up here. I think if you're serious about survival, you're going to become a farmer. Of some sort or another. When I say farmer, I'm using it in the big sense. You know, you're going to raise critters. The old sense. You're going to have some critters, you're going to have some chickens, you're going to have some garden going on, you're going to have a little system going on around your place. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do it. You don't have to go to permaculture courses, and you don't have to buy the newest rake out of the back of Mother Earth News, and you don't have to buy the Amish seed starter thing, but you are going to get dirty and sweaty and a little bit, and you're going to have to go out there and work at it. It's not going to grow overnight by itself. Primary alternate contingency emergency. You know, you talked about that. I talk about it all the time. I went over, you know, short-term, medium-term, long-term food storage plans, systems, if you will, and then we get into sustainable agriculture. There is one more. It's my emergency plan. I didn't tell you this in the intro, but I'm an Army Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape instructor, an Army survival instructor, if you will. And I could, I'm not bragging, I know I could walk off into those woods because I have a knife on my things. I've made knives before too. But I could go out there and live. Hunter-gatherer existence. It's no life, right? But you should have the skill set to do it. If you look at hunter-gatherer cultures, whether it's here in North America, Africa, Asia, wherever, yeah, they've been around forever. Some still exist to a degree or another in South America, but they don't have any art to speak of. They don't sit around and discuss philosophy and the higher ideals, you know, and talk about God or read their Bible or whatever, because they spend their entire waking existence trying to get food. That's why agriculture came about. That's why the Indians here in this continent started growing rice up north and beans and corn and those things. It's like, well, now we have some leisure time. We can sit around and do other cool stuff. But you should know how to hunt. If you don't know how to hunt, get with somebody who knows how to hunt and say, hey man, could you show me how to hunt deer? I'm talking to women too. Women should know how to hunt. You should know how to, I don't eat squirrels or rabbits, but they're ridiculously easy to kill. You should know how to do that. They're also ridiculously easy to go out all day long and not get anything if you don't know some simple little things that it's really easy to learn if you just get with somebody who goes, yeah, I'll take you out, and they'll show you. How many people here eat wild edibles, and I'm not talking about blackberries? Okay, good. So there's a learning curve here that we can learn to eat wild plants. I told you earlier, my wife feeds us weeds all the time. She just goes out, I call it weeds. She picks this, that, and the other thing. The best way to learn what wild edibles you can eat in your area is to get with somebody in your area and say, show me. You can't read it in a book. You can't do it on the internet. If you do, be very, very careful. But the best way to learn what a wild edible is to go out, find it with somebody who knows what they're doing, pick it, take it home, prepare it, and eat it. Once you do that, it locks it in your head. And there is a lot of food out there that just takes you going out and getting it, that most people don't know, and like I said, other than blackberry. The down part, I told you, was that they don't develop much art, culture, philosophy because they're spending all their waking hours hunting. The other thing is, in our situation, survival situation, it's dangerous. Because now you're out and moving around in a relatively unfamiliar area, trying to hunter, gather, forage, and stuff like that. And you're wandering into people's territory who may not want you wandering into their territory. All right. Summary. How much food for how long should you store? It's up to you. Food is cheap. I really recommend you store as much food as possible. Keeping in mind, you don't want it to go bad, you don't want bugs to get it, you don't want to waste it and let it come out of date. So you have to have a plan to rotate that. But really, I would like to see everybody store food so that if another family showed up, you could take care of them. For all you know, that family could be a trauma surgeon and your daughter is having an appendicitis attack. Cool. You feed him, he takes care of her, everybody's happy. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. And it's within the capability of most of us. Heck, if you had enough time and gas to drive here to come to this event today, you have enough money to get some food put away for people. Try to help other people. Try to build in contingency planning. That's why I said get as much as you can. Don't put it all in one place, so scatter it around a little bit. Short-term food is groceries. Just go to your grocery store and buy food. It'll last. Medium-term is what I call the survival food, MREs, Mountain House, things like that. Long-term food, the buckets of the big four, rice, wheat, corn, and beans. And then sustainable agriculture, grow a garden, shoot a deer, hunter-gatherer, foraging. Here's something I haven't told you. A good preparedness plan will cover all 5 of those categories. If you have a good food preparedness plan, you're not going to have just Mountain House in the closet. You're going to have a little garden, you're going to go shoot some things, you're going to have some long-term grocery, just regular ragu, spaghetti sauce, and spaghetti. We live in troubled times. If you hang out with me, you'll know, because we talk about little details that come up in the news every day. It's a big, scary world out there. There is a reason that the presidents of the United States, from whatever party, whoever they are, look at their picture when they go into office, look at their picture when they come out of office, typically 8 years later. Those guys age 20 years. I know why they do. Because I was never the President of the United States, but when I worked at one job that I had at national level intel, it is amazing what's going on in the world that the average person does not have a clue about what's going on. I'm not going to sit here and do some weird YouTube conspiracy theory thing. I'm just telling you, there is real stuff that goes on every day that we don't know about, and some of it's really bad stuff. Presidents know about all of it. I just saw a little slice of it. It's a dangerous world in which we live, and things can change quickly. So the food system could fail, and you want to have food for your people. Food is cheap now. You can go buy it, whatever, as much as you want. You're not depriving anybody. I told you already, I fear's not the right word. I'll just use fear. Work with me on it. I fear the people who stock up on guns and ammo and don't stock up on food. They're going to be part of the problem, and they are in our culture. And they're not doing it on purpose. They're not like that idiot that was on, I was on Doomsday Prepper, by the way, a little cameo. But they're not like that idiot that said, oh yeah, we're going to go, be marauders for the preppers. Dude, you're going to die in the road when you try and do that to the preppers. But it's still a problem. We have a problem. And we don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. And so I would say for you, please resolve now to be part of that solution and not part of the problem. You can help a lot of people. You can help yourself if you just take a couple steps now. Thank you very much. What are your questions?